Hey, it's Seth Mosley. We're on the Made It Music podcast. We've got Wally in from Way FM, the Wally Show.
Very popular, highly rated, not really, but it's a radio show.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I always, when you get off work, probably the last thing you want to do is go do another interview or radio show.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, you talk for 4 hours, and then by the time I'm sick of my own voice by the end of that, even, and it's like, but no, I'm glad to be here. This is kind of fun. I like getting to talk about the business. Yeah. We do a lot of goofy, fun radio stuff, but I do love music, and I like the business of music too. So
yeah, well, last time you were here hanging out, we just got to talk a little bit, and you're involved in so many different facets of the industry, and have been, and just have so much experience and knowledge to share. So it just made total sense. Like, this guy's got to be on.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate that.
So what was your first dollar that you made in the music business?
First dollar that I made, I was actually in a band back in the day. Heaven's Fire! Plug, what up? Horrible metal band that I was a part of. But yeah, the first time I ever got paid to play was at a club in Fort Lauderdale to about, and I don't want to brag, about 4 people. Okay. And it was the worst experience ever. You're trying to play in this club, and it was a Christian band, and so we're playing, Christian songs, and 4 people getting drunk. But I was happy about that dollar because I survived it, because it was not a good experience.
So in a Christian metal band, Heaven's Fire. I am gonna go look that up. I hope I can find something.
I don't think you can. I think I got rid of everything, and this is before the internet. That's how old I am. Okay. Before internet stuff was around, I have a cassette of it left from a demo that we play on the show from time to time, and everyone makes fun of me because everyone I work with is younger, so they don't understand mid-'80s metal, because I love it. I'm still a fan. But yeah, I get teased pretty hard.
Yeah, I love it. Well, between Heaven's Fire and going full time, when did music enable you to go full time?
I went full time in radio, because I guess a lot of radio guys are kind of frustrated musicians, because you get into it because you love music, and then from there, I was out there slugging like everybody, trying to make a living at it and stuff like that, and it wasn't the plan, and so I went to college and graduated with a weird degree in organizational communication, which I don't even use. It's like to be an HR director. And I got my first job in radio because a friend of my wife's was working there, and she said, we have a job opening for a sales guy, and they're looking for young people out of college. Why don't you try? And so I did. I almost shut the place down. I was trying to be creative. You know how you try to do that with with your first job? So I sent a brown paper box wrapped in just brown paper with no return address, and a Jack in the Box that when you did, and it would pop up, and it said, "I hear you want people that think out of the box." But the problem was the Jack in the Box was making noise, and they had just fired a guy like 3 days before, and they thought he sent a bomb to the station, and so they cleared out the station for my resume. But I got the job. So
you made an impression.
Yeah, I did, and so I highly recommend that. But no, and so that was what got me in to where then I kind of worked my way through a promotions gig and sales and all of that, and ended up getting on the air, and that's where I found what I'm supposed to do. Like, if your spiritual gift is sarcasm, there aren't a lot of places for you, and so radio seemed to work out.
Yeah. So over the years, how long has it been since you got that first Jack in the Box gig?
24 years. Wow. I've done this. Yeah.
So, and you being on the air, you're obviously helping a lot of artists launch careers and get heard and be known. What is that sort of led you? Like, was it the Christian radio the whole time? Was it rock?
It was mainstream radio, like rock radio. Like, I've done most formats. I did, AAA. I did alternative. The biggest alternative station I was at was 99X in Atlanta. That was a heritage alternative station and bastion of cool, and it was great. But then I did active rock and stuff, and then I've done sports, and then all of that led me ultimately, because I was part of the last few shows I were on, really aggressive, blue, crass, push every envelope shows, and in being like a believer, trying to justify that, you just can't. There's some point where you can't justify your actions anymore, and it was always an internal struggle. And so for me, one day it just kind of snapped, and it was like, all right, now's the time to move, but where am I going to go? I'm like, I can't do this. And call out of the blue from a guy that gave me my start goes, hey, there's a Christian station that I think will take a chance on you. They're the only one in this format, and I want you to talk to Way FM. And I did, and it still took another probably 6 months or a year to get worked out to where everybody was good, and it came together, and then that's what I've been doing ever since. I've got 11 years here.
Yeah. So since being at Way FM, what are some of the ways that you've been able to kind of help, put artists and creatives on the map?
When we first started, we did a show called Total Access, and it was almost all artist driven. Like we were doing 4 interviews a week, and it was so heavily that. And then we made the decision inside the company to scale back on that because it was just too much, And so then I went
too much work.
Both, and then also too, when you do the same thing over and over and over again, it ceases to be special. And so what we started doing was focusing more on, let's do less but do it better, and then it'll stand out more. And so that's kind of still the mode I operate now by. But I mean, I get stuff from people still every day. Hey, tell me what you think about this song that we just wrote, and Carrollton was one of those bands. They sent me something years ago, and I still remember writing back the guy saying, I get stuff every day that sucks. You guys don't suck. Keep going. and he was like, man, like, you have no idea how much that meant to us. Like, I held on to that, and then the next thing you know, they made it. Now, I didn't make them because they're super good.
Sure.
Like, it doesn't get much better than them, just acoustic harmonies, and just, they're great. And they deserved it. They had a place, but I had a small little part of their story.
Yeah.
And then 2, when it comes back up, I'm like, oh, I've got a connection with them. So there is influence in this industry, to pretend that there's not, and that old saying of it's who you know, not what you know, it's very true. It helps,
Yeah. So relationships, and man, I love the Carrollton example because they're, I don't know how much you still follow them, but Made for This, I love that.
We're playing them. We're playing them now. We're playing Shelter now.
Yeah.
Great song, and I love hearing it, and I like just knowing where they came from, and that they're everybody that's out there slugging away trying to make a living.
Yeah.
They just did it. And this is not to say this about them, but I've always said that it's always not the best musicians that make it. It's the ones that don't give up. There are a lot of great musicians woodshedding somewhere that, or doing a 9 to 5 because they quit, and they're better than half the people that are on the radio now, but they gave up, and the people that stick it out, they usually it works out for them.
All right. Have there been any surprises over the years for you? And you don't have to obviously name names, but
I will.
But you will. You may. You can. You certainly can. I'm not going to stop you. Have there been any surprises over the years of like people that you're like, okay, well, I didn't think they were going to make it, they blew up, or people that you thought were going to be huge and then they just never went anywhere?
I'll tell you, the one that's the saddest for me is Fee. Fee was tearing it up, and I was friends with them and stuff, and I was like, you guys are going to be the next Tomlin. You guys are in this, you're writing great songs, you're younger than Tomlin's audience is, and you're speaking a really great message to them. And then Steve kind of had a fall there, messed up in his marriage, and that one I was just genuinely sad over because I really thought that was going to be, he was going to be the next big thing. Yeah. And there's been other people, I should stop proclaiming that because there's been other people like, you're it, Sidewalk Prophets, we were early on and we loved them and we're like, you guys are great. And we love those guys. And Britt Nicole was one. I was happy that I was like, man, I just, big things. Because she was so cool. She would come on our show back when we were doing Total Access. She had the most appearances on the show because she was fun. And she always would play around with you and would always bring content. And I didn't have her sing the first 3 times, I think, because she's a pop act. And they're like, why aren't you having her perform? I'm like, I was kind of doing her a favor because I didn't think she could. And the record guy's like, this girl can sing. I'm like, all right. let's do it. And she came on and did something acoustic and then just killed it.
Yeah.
And so she was somebody that I had like high hopes for too. And she's still out there doing it as well, which is good. I think she's crazy talented.
Yeah. So the contrast of that is, I'm sure you get artists in that don't give you content.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? Like, what do you as a radio host, like, what did she do that you brought her back in so many times?
She was just fun. Like she would let us play around with her. Like we'd take her out of her comfort zone. And so the first thing we did was like a rap battle with her. And for the record, I'm a horrible rapper, but that's the joke, you know? It's like, my name is Wally and I'm here to say, hey, what, you know?
Yeah.
But she got in and just dove in and head first and had fun with it. Some artists haven't been as willing to play and it doesn't go that well. Now, 11 years in, I know who I can take to different places. Sure. Like Matthew West, I'll bring him in and I'll throw anything at him. I always prepare, but I don't need to with him, but I still do. Yeah. But I can say, let's write a song on the spot. He's going to write a humorous song on the spot for somebody, and he's going to kill it. But you can't do that with everybody. So half of it's knowing what the skill sets are, and it's more than just making them sometimes uncomfortable, because that can be funny. But what I learned was you got to play to their strengths and put them in a place to succeed. That's what Fallon does so well. You know, versus the tension, it's like put them in a place to succeed. And so that's kind of how I shifted out of that.
So your goal is not so much as to create these awkward moments as maybe it was.
It used to be. Yeah, because I lived in that world and I thrived on it. But then in mainstream radio, that's what you want. You want that tension. Yeah. You know, I remember Ian Astbury from The Cult. Do you remember that band?
Yeah, totally.
Interviewing Ian one day, and I had asked him something, and I don't even remember how we got into it, but it was about being molested as a child. Wow. And he offered that up. Like I kind of laid something in there, and he goes, well, I was molested as a child. I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, wow. And he goes, well, do you want to talk about it? And I'm like, okay, like if you're good, let's go. And it was that weird tension that was unintended, but ended up being like this really cool interview in the mainstream world about a really serious subject from somebody who was like an icon to people back then. Wow,
that's crazy, and man, that's great wisdom on your part, obviously, to have learned over the years, you know, what works, what doesn't, and probably sparing some artists a little bit of tears as well.
I had the opportunity to spare somebody tears a week ago, because it was somebody that I had an interaction with 9 years ago that didn't go well. I knew it wasn't their strength, and they're like, hey, do you want to have them on the air? And I'm like, no, I'm good. Thank them for me. Yeah. But because I knew it would be awkward. Yeah. Oh, I got a good awkward story.
Give me it.
Okay, this is good. This was my fault. Yeah. So years ago, I had Switchfoot on the show. Okay. And this was at 99X in Atlanta. And so we have him on, and the day before, because I was a believer at 99X, and so I was the conservative in the midst of massive liberalism, and they used to make fun of me all the time and stuff. And okay, whatever. But they had done this quiz for me, what Wally wouldn't let his daughter do. And so, and it was designed to point me out as a crazy right-wing, ultra-religious fanatic. And I get it. That's the shtick. Yeah. So Switchfoot comes in. I'm a believer. I know these guys, who they are and stuff, and I'm all excited because I'm like, I'm going to give them this same quiz, and they'll be able to answer these questions, but not come off right wing, but come off normal. Yeah. And so like normal believers.
Like you were trying to use it as an opportunity almost.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I'm like, and this is a great way that they can share a little bit of their faith and who they are. And one of the questions offended them so badly, they stopped the interview and walked out. And I'm just sitting there going, I wasn't trying to do that. Okay. And so they're gone. So I never see him again. Flash forward 10 years, and I end up at Way FM. It's my first week on the station, and I go to this thing called GMA, which was like a radio conference, and artists are there. I go there. My first interview is Switchfoot. And I'm like, this is glorious. I'm going to lean into this tension a little bit. So we bring him in, and I'm like, and I got John there, and so I'm like, All right. So I ask him a few questions, and we have a regular interview. So I'm like, hey, so I'm just curious, have you ever like been offended and walked out of an interview? And he goes, one time. There was one time in Atlanta, and by this time, like, I'd cut my hair and everything, so I looked different. And he goes, "There's one time in Atlanta, the guy, was just crossed the line for me." And I said, "Yeah, I know that story." And I said, "Do you know how I know that story?" I said, "That was me." But the best part of this was, he goes, "I know it was you." And I'm like, really? And it was so cool because we got to sit there and talk about it now, years later, not charged. I got to explain to him where I was coming from and what my intention was. He got to explain to me why they were hypersensitive to it at that time. And it was a really cool thing. And that we've been, friendly. I wouldn't say friends. I don't go to the Bro-Am.
Sure.
Call me.
Yeah.
call me Foreman. But like, it was cool. So that was one that was awkward, and I was purposely trying to make it awkward. Yeah. But he was kind and the better person in it than me. Sure. And it became like a cool moment.
Wow. That's incredible. Let's jump into our full circle 5. So just kind of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What one book, record, or resource would you most commonly recommend to people wanting to get into the music business?
Oh, wow. What is it? It's the business of music. Oh, what is I had to read it for a thing one time. I can't remember the name of it. Lee. Dang it.
Need our fact checkers.
Yes, we're going to need somebody to have to look that up. But it's one of the best tutorials on what this business holds, because you learn about things like recoupment and upfront monies and what literally happens, and how record companies take me to lunch and then they write the name of a band down so it goes on their tab, crazy things that you would not believe happen in this business. It really is a good tutorial for that.
Yeah, maybe Colton can find the Colton's our cameraman over here in the corner. Maybe he can look that up, and we'll find the title. It's Business of Music, Lee something.
The music of business. I probably got the Lee wrong. Like, I probably got a lot wrong. But boy, you should check it out.
Favorite record?
Favorite record,
or one that you recommend people the most?
Oh, it's one I can't recommend to people, but it's my favorite. Because it has a lot of bad words on it. No, like for me, there's a band called Shinedown. So it's not a Christian band, but I like them, and there's so much angst in this guy, and I got to know them on a small scale. Like, I knew the guy that was the A&R guy that signed them, and I got to meet them and hang out with them a little bit, and I feel more for what his backstory, the singer's backstory was, and it made me start looking for that in his music, and that's what made it powerful to me. Like, Us and Them was a great album. Fly From the Inside, like off their first album. But it was like I could look past the things that maybe didn't jive with my philosophy or my faith into seeing and having a concern for this guy as a person, and what he was dealing with and how that was manifesting itself in music.
It's good. One of my favorite questions to ask is, do you have a favorite failure? And what I mean by that is failure, it can turn into a very valuable thing by learning something, by changing the way you operate or changing your perspective on something. Do you have a favorite failure?
Favorite failure. This is a tough one to answer because I got a bunch of things that I've done really badly over the years. I'm trying to think of one that stands out more than the others. Boy, I'm trying to think if I had like places where I could have been a better person, probably to somebody.
I've had a few of those. Yeah,
like I'm trying to get to the point where I make my second reaction my first reaction, because my first reaction is always over the top and this person's out to get me and stuff. And my second reaction is where I stop and think about something a little bit more and process it. And then that's how I wish I would always default to that. But I typically, I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
Still work in progress.
That's you, me, and all of us together.
Yeah.
It's good.
I got it. I tried to be funny, and I did something that was a segment on a show. Boy, this is not making me look good. But it's serious. Like, it was back at the mainstream days, and we had done a bit called 60 Seconds for the Day Off, and we would give we would write a fake commercial for someone's company, then we would play it for their boss, and they would get the day off. But we always would write the commercial in a way that was funny and kind of take shots at the company. And this one company, it was for a thing called Babies Can't Wait, and it was actually for looking for children with special needs. Yeah, you see, this is gonna be bad. Looking for kids with special needs, so they needed to find kids with special needs. So you come to a rock station and ask a rock station to do that. We do it tongue in cheek, like a monster truck ad, and yeah, you're going, oh my gosh, you're right. Okay, so flash forward to we do this. Some people get fired as a result. I try to take the hit for it. They won't fire me, but they fire my boss. And I'm like, no, I should be fired. I wrote it, And it got into my personal life because my wife, that's the maddest she's ever been at me. Haven't had a fight really in 29 years of being together. That one was like, you crossed the line and you knew better. And I did something to make a joke, and it definitely, she still brings it up every once in a while. But what I learned from that, though, is I did learn that the joke isn't always worth it, and that you have to see the bigger picture. But that was a big failure, too, because, like, our pastor had a special needs kid, so it caused, like, a big riffle in our church, and I had to go to him and say, I just owned it. I'm like, man, I'm sorry. I said, I could tell you somebody else did it, but it's not the truth. It was me, and I'm sorry. And I just remember his face. It was kind but hurt, and, like, so I'd hate to see that in somebody again.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing to learn from.
Thanks, Barbara Walters.
Let's jump on the next question. But before you dove full time into music and got that first gig, could you pinpoint the biggest thing that might have held you back?
Oh, held me back from...
Or kept you from just jumping in?
Oh, I've always been practical. We were talking earlier about the people that don't give up are the ones that are going to make it. I was always practical. So I always had a job, and then I started, dating my wife, and so I didn't want to be gone and stuff. And so, like, I let practical things hold me back from being that person that says, I'm going to take the risk regardless of anything. I had friends in bands that all moved to LA to make a run at it, and to me, I'm like, no, I'll do it this way. I'll be more strategic. But that strategery it ended up being the thing I think that held me back. Now, thank the Lord it did, because I'm horrible as a musician. So it worked out well that I found where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, and you're here. So what's something that is working for you right now?
I think just being honest and I hate to use the word real, because usually when people say I'm real, it means you're not. But being upfront, I think, about who I am in this world, in the constraints of Christian radio, because there's a lot of people that, and I don't want to bash anyone else in Christian radio, because it's a tricky thing to navigate. But there are a lot of people, and I know them, that don't talk about a lot of the stuff in their life, or the really bad, hard stuff, because their audience will push back against them. I don't mind that pushback, because for the one that pushes back against me, there's 10 that needed to hear that. And so that's where I find it works. And I've point blank told people, like, I'm never going to listen again. And I would write them back and say, tell me where you live, and I will find a Christian station there. I have friends all over the country that do this. I'll find one for you, because you don't sound like you're a good fit for us. Well, you can't tell me what to do. Okay, then listen. It's so funny. But I think that is just doing that and being consistent, because when you do that, it's a much slower road. People will not like you ahead of time. Like, they will resist you. They'll be angry with you. That's what happened when I first got here. But over time, they will come to be your biggest defenders. And now I don't have to defend myself in social media anymore. Like, when I say something and someone disagrees with it, I have a bunch of people that go, no, this is what he's saying, and he spent enough time here showing his heart. Does he make mistakes? 100%, but you're misunderstanding him, and that wasn't the case early on, so it took time to build that.
That's good. So last question of the Full Circle 5, and this is an interesting question. I always love to see the answers it gets, because it's all over the place. But if your business collapsed, if Way FM, everything just kind of went off the face of the earth, and you had to start over, but you still have all the experience, knowledge, and wisdom that you have right now, where would you start? Like square one?
I'd intern for you. And then from there, I would go and become a multi-bajillionaire, and we would have a really bad split, and then we'd be rivals, and it would be ugly, but then we'd both come full circle and hug it out 5 years later.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, and we'd start like a power group again. It would be fantastic. We might even do a boy band together.
Best answer I've heard yet. So is there anything that you guys are working on right now, or that you're personally working on, that you want to talk about? Care to share?
No, it just, for me, it's like I'm just going through every day. Like, it's creative factory work, man. Like, you finish your show that day and it's just gone. It's in the ether, and you just got to create the show the next day and the next day and the next day. So it's kind of that's the grind of it. But there's a couple things that we are working on. Like, I want to do it's funny, we're talking about the special needs thing and how I messed up earlier. I'm looking to try and do this thing for parents and kids in the summer, where we give a trip for a kid to go to a special needs park or camp. Wow. and I want to see it start with one and then grow and give the parents a break, because the more I meet people, and I have a special needs child in our family too, my nephew, sure. And the more I meet people and I see the grind that it is for the families, it's like there's a passion in that for me. And if I can help alleviate that for somebody and use this platform to do something that is good and scales on a bigger scale, like that, to me would be really cool. So that's one of the things that we've been talking about lately.
Yeah, incredible. So how can people hear about, watch, listen to Wally and all of your glory?
Oh, a couple ways. Allwally.com, which sounds like I really love myself, because my email is wally@allwally. Like, just, I hate giving the email out, so you can hit me up like that. But there, and then obviously Facebook, Wally Show, and Twitter, and all that stuff, and
Great.
Instagram.
Well, man, thank you so much. Great stories. Thanks for being on with us.
I appreciate the time, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for not having our knees during the whole interview.
We're not hitting.
Yes, because yes, Seth, this is not awkward at all. Could we sit a little farther apart?
Yeah, it's been awesome, man. I'm Seth Mosley. We're on the Made It in Music podcast. This has been Wally here at Full Circle Music.